Book Talk begins at 2 minutes and 6 seconds. Welcome to CraftLit, the podcast for crafters who love books. My name is Heather Ordover, and I'm podcasting from where the Delaware River meets the Old York Road, New Hope, Pennsylvania. Episode 644, Destashify. This episode of CraftLit is brought to us by our good patrons at patreon.com/craftlit. The patrons we would like to highlight this week are Wendy Preston, Rachel Molinar, Elnora Rice, Amy Ledoux, and Martha Donnelly. Thank you so much. We could not do this without you. Okay, so really quick, I had a video show up in my feed about Destashify. I am sure plenty of people know about this website. I am just here to tell you, in the days after Christmas, I thought it might be useful for you too to have access to this video/information. It's like a thrift store for crafters. The end. That's it. That's all you need to know, right? Because, holy cow, that's just great. You don't want to throw stuff out, but sometimes you need to make room. And if you are the way station through which lots of things travel, this might be one of those ways that they travel. So, Destashify links will be in the show notes. You can look into more of it. But now let's get to chapter 56 of The Three Musketeers. So, not so many words as last week. The first one that kind of jumped out at me was the use of the word battery. It's such a modern sounding word because we have AA's and AAA's and C's and D's, batteries a go-go, rechargeable batteries. This is battery like gun battery. So when you talk about erecting your batteries, that's what we're talking about, the ramparts where you're going to be firing from. I got a lot of Poe, Edgar Allan Poe vibes from today's chapter in the setting. There's a story that's being told. So there's a story within the story of this chapter. And in that story that's very dreamlike, it feels like a setting from an Edgar Allan Poe story. No question that Poe would have been able to read Dumas, so possible cross-pollination there. I don't know. But the other thing is that, again, Dumas was already working on the Count of Monte Cristo. And so that also jibes with the way the descriptions go in this chapter, I think. It feels like there's a connection. There's a anachronistic reference to being lost in the American desert, that people who are lost in the American desert can feel the approach of a serpent. I am going to put money down on this. I know that there was writing that was going on at the time, and Mark Twain was the most famous one doing this, but even before him, there were stories coming out of the explored West and the being explored West of America that were getting brought over to and read in Europe by Europeans. As you can imagine, some of this is going to be utter binnable garbage. Some of it was probably legit, but we exported a lot of those kind of stories. Also the captivity narratives and things like that. A lot of this stuff got taken over. So the image of America would have been kind of skewed and unique, but also very not Europe. The funky part is, of course, nobody would have been making this reference at the time that the story is supposed to have taken place. This was, I'm pretty sure, Dumas just getting swept up by something that he read recently, and it kind of flowed into the story. The phrase expiation is making amends. Lucretia. You may have heard of the poem The Rape of Lucrece This is the same thing. Lucretia, famous story. She was raped by Sextus. That's really all you need to know. Fatuity is kind of like stupidity. However, in one of the newer translations, it is translated as egotism, which fits really nicely. So when you hear fatuity, think egotism. Sibyl, there's a reference to a Sibyl, S-I-B-Y-L, is a reference to, I think she was an oracular priestess of Apollo. I think it was Apollo. But she's just a soothsayer, a fate foreteller, somebody who would be able to give a prophecy. That's all. A Cassandra would be like a Sibyl, but one who nobody paid attention to. But we're not talking about a Cassandra. We're talking about a Sibyl. Poniard. We've talked about poniards before. It's just another word for a dagger. And curiass, C-U-R-I-A-S-S. I am sure that anybody who has participated in Society for Creative Anachronisms knows what this is and can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe that curiass was a term in general for breastplate, the part of the armor specifically that would have covered your sternum, I think. So, yeah, let me know if I'm wrong on that in the comments. And that is it. Let's listen to chapters 56 and 57 of The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. If you are listening to a different version of the story, you can skip ahead to 59 minutes and 51 seconds. All right, let's go.
Chapter 56 of the D'Artagnan Romances, Volume 1, The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas, translated by William Robson. Captivity, the 5th day. Milady had, however, achieved a half-triumph, and success doubled her forces. It was not difficult to conquer, as she had hitherto done, men prompt to let themselves be seduced, and whom the gallant education of a court led quickly into her net. Milady was handsome enough not to find much resistance on the part of the flesh, and she was sufficiently skillful to prevail over all the obstacles of the mind. But this time she had to contend with an unpolished nature, concentrated and insensible by force of austerity. Religion and its observances had made Felton a man inaccessible to ordinary seductions. There fermented in that sublimated brain plans so vast, projects so tumultuous, that there remained no room for any capricious or material love, that sentiment which is fed by leisure and grows with corruption. Milady had, then, made a breach by her false virtue in the opinion of a man horribly prejudiced against her, and by her beauty in the heart of a man hitherto chaste and pure. In short, she had taken the measure of motives hitherto unknown to herself, through this experiment, made upon the most rebellious subject that nature and religion could submit to her study. Many a time, nevertheless, during the evening she despaired of fate and of herself. She did not invoke God, we very well know, but she had faith in the genius of evil, that immense sovereignty which reigns in all the details of human life, and by which, as in the Arabian fable, a single pomegranate seed is sufficient to reconstruct a ruined world. Milady, being well prepared for the reception of Felton, was able to erect her batteries for the next day. She knew she had only 2 days left, that when once the order was signed by Buckingham, and Buckingham would sign it the more readily from its bearing a false name, and he could not, therefore, recognize the woman in question. Once this order was signed, we say, the Baron would make her embark immediately, and she knew very well that women condemned to exile employ arms much less powerful in their seductions than the pretendedly virtuous woman whose beauty is lighted by the sun of the world, whose style the voice of fashion lauds, and whom a halo of aristocracy gilds with enchanting splendors. To be a woman condemned to a painful and disgraceful punishment is no impediment to beauty, but it is an obstacle to the recovery of power. Like all persons of real genius, Milady knew what suited her nature and her means. Poverty was repugnant to her. Degradation took away 2/3 of her greatness. Milady was only a queen while among queens. The pleasure of satisfied pride was necessary to her domination. To command inferior beings was rather a humiliation than a pleasure for her. She should certainly return from her exile. She did not doubt that a single instant. But how long might this exile last? For an active, ambitious nature like that of Milady, days not spent in climbing are inauspicious days. What word, then, can be found to describe the days which they occupy in descending? To lose a year, 2 years, 3 years, is to talk of an eternity. To return after the death or disgrace of the cardinal, perhaps. To return when D'Artagnan and his friends, happy and triumphant, should have received from the queen the reward they had well acquired by the services they had rendered her. These were devouring ideas that a woman like Milady could not endure. For the rest, the storm which raged within her doubled her strength, and she would have burst the walls of her prison if her body had been able to take for a single instant the proportions of her mind. Then, that which spurred her on additionally in the midst of all this was the remembrance of the cardinal. What must the mistrustful, restless, suspicious cardinal think of her silence? The cardinal, not merely her only support, her only prop, her only protector at present, but still further, the principal instrument of her future fortune and vengeance. She knew him. She knew that at her return from a fruitless journey, it would be in vain to tell him of her imprisonment, in vain to enlarge upon the sufferings she had undergone. The cardinal would reply, with the sarcastic calmness of the skeptic, strong at once by power and genius, "You should not have allowed yourself to be taken." Then Milady collected all her energies, murmuring in the depths of her soul the name of Felton, the only beam of light that penetrated to her in the hell into which she had fallen, and like a serpent which folds and unfolds its rings to ascertain its strength, she enveloped Felton beforehand in the thousand meshes of her inventive imagination. Time, however, passed away. The hours, one after another, seemed to awaken the clock as they passed, and every blow of the brass hammer resounded upon the heart of the prisoner. At 9 o'clock, Lord de Winter made his customary visit, examined the window and the bars, sounded the floor and the walls, looked to the chimney and the doors, without, during this long and minute examination, he or Milady pronouncing a single word. Doubtless both of them understood that the situation had become too serious to lose time in useless words and aimless wrath. "Well," said the baron on leaving her, "you will not escape tonight." At 10 o'clock Felton came and placed the sentinel. Milady recognized his step. She was as well acquainted with it now as a mistress is with that of the lover of her heart. And yet Milady at the same time detested and despised this weak fanatic. That was not the appointed hour. Felton did not enter. 2 hours after, as midnight sounded, the sentinel was relieved. This time it was the hour, and from this moment Milady waited with impatience. The new sentinel commenced his walk in the corridor. At the expiration of 10 minutes, Felton came. Milady was all attention. "Listen," said the young man to the sentinel. "On no pretense leave the door, for you know that last night my lord punished a soldier for having quit his post for an instant, although I, during his absence, watched in his place." "Yes, I know it," said the soldier. "I recommend you, therefore, to keep the strictest watch. For my part, I am going to pay a second visit to this woman, who I fear entertains sinister intentions upon her own life, and I have received orders to watch her."
"Good," murmured Milady. "The austere Puritan lies."
As to the soldier, he only smiled. "Zounds, Lieutenant," said he, "you are not unlucky in being charged with such commissions, particularly if my lord has authorized you to look into her bed." Felton blushed. Under any other circumstance he would have reprimanded the soldier for indulging in such pleasantry, but his conscience murmured too loud for his mouth to dare speak. "If I call, come," said he. "If anyone comes, call me." "I will, Lieutenant," said the soldier. Felton entered Milady's apartment. Milady arose. "You are here," said she. "I promised to come," said Felton, "and I have come." "You promised me something else." "What? My God!" said the young man, who, in spite of his self-command, felt his knees tremble and the sweat start from his brow. "You promised to bring a knife, and to leave it with me after our interview." "Say no more of that, madame," said Felton. "There is no situation, however terrible it may be, which can authorize a creature of God to inflict death upon himself. I have reflected, and I cannot, must not be guilty of such a sin." "Ah, you have reflected?" said the prisoner, sitting down in her armchair with a smile of disdain. "And I also have reflected." "Upon what?" "That I can have nothing to say to a man who does not keep his word." "Oh, my God!" murmured Felton. "You may retire," said Milady. "I will not talk." "Here is the knife," said Felton, drawing his pocket the weapon which he had brought, according to his promise, but which he hesitated to give to his prisoner. "Let me see it," said Milady. "For what purpose?" "Upon my honor, I will instantly return it to you. You shall place it on that table, and you may remain between it and me." Felton offered the weapon to Milady, who examined the temper of it attentively, and who tried the point of the tip of her finger. "Well," said she, returning the knife to the young officer, "this is fine and good steel. You are a faithful friend, Felton." Felton took back the weapon and laid it upon the table, as he had agreed with the prisoner. Milady followed him with her eyes, and made a gesture of satisfaction. "Now," said she, "listen to me." The request was needless. The young officer stood upright before her, awaiting her words as if to devour them. "Felton," said Milady, with a solemnity full of melancholy, "imagine that your sister, the daughter of your father, speaks to you. While yet young, unfortunately handsome, I was dragged into a snare. I resisted. Ambushes and violences multiplied around me, but I resisted. The religion I serve, the God I adore, were blasphemed because I called upon that religion and that God, but still I resisted. Then outrages were heaped upon me, and as my soul was not subdued, they wished to defile my body forever. Finally—" Milady stopped, and a bitter smile passed over her lips. "Finally?" said Felton. "Finally? What did they do?" "At length, one evening, my enemy resolved to paralyze the resistance he could not conquer. One evening he mixed a powerful narcotic with my water. Scarcely had I finished my repast when I felt myself sink by degrees into a strange torpor. Although I was without mistrust, a vague fear seized me, and I tried to struggle against sleepiness. I arose. I wished to run to the window and call for help, but my legs refused their office. It appeared as if the ceiling sank upon my head and crushed me with its weight. I stretched out my arms. I tried to speak. I could only utter inarticulate sounds, and irresistible faintness came over me. I supported myself by a chair, feeling that I was about to fall, but this support was soon insufficient on account of my weak arms. I fell upon one knee, then upon both. I tried to pray, but my tongue was frozen. God doubtless neither heard nor saw me, and I sank upon the floor, a prey to a slumber which resembled death. Of all that passed in that sleep, or the time which gilded away while it lasted, I have no remembrance. The only thing I recollect is that I awoke in bed in a round chamber, the furniture of which was sumptuous, and into which light only penetrated by an opening in the ceiling. No door gave entrance to the room. It might be called a magnificent prison. It was a long time before I was able to make out what place I was in. or to take account of the details I describe, my mind appeared to strive in vain to shake off the heavy darkness of the sleep from which I could not rouse myself. I had vague perceptions of space traversed, of the rolling of a carriage, of a horrible dream in which my strength had been exhausted, but all this was so dark and so indistinct in my mind that these events seemed to belong to another life than mine, and yet mixed with mine in fantastic duality. At times, the state into which I had fallen appeared so strange that I believed myself dreaming. I arose trembling. My clothes were near me on a chair. I neither remembered having undressed myself nor going to bed. Then by degrees the reality broke upon me, full of chaste terrors. I was no longer in the house where I had dwelt. As well as I could judge by the light of the sun, the day was already 2/3 gone. It was the evening before when I had fallen asleep. My sleep, then, must have lasted 24 hours? What had taken place during this long sleep? I dressed myself as quickly as possible. My slow and stiff motions all attested that the effects of the narcotic were not yet entirely dissipated. The chamber was evidently furnished for the reception of a woman, and the most finished coquette could not have formed a wish. But on casting her eyes about the apartment, she would have found that wish accomplished. Certainly I was not the first captive that had been shut up in this splendid prison, but you may easily comprehend, Felton, that the more superb the prison, the greater was my terror. Yes, it was a prison, for I tried in vain to get out of it. I sounded all the walls in the hopes of discovering a door, but everywhere the walls returned a full and flat sound. I made the tour of the room at least 20 times in search of an outlet of some kind, but there was none. I sank exhausted with fatigue and terror into an armchair. Meantime, night came on rapidly, and with night my terrors increased. I did not know, but I had better remained where I was seated. It appeared that I was surrounded with unknown dangers into which I was about to fall at every instant. Although I had eaten nothing since the evening before, my fears prevented my feeling hunger. No noise from without by which I could measure the time reached me. I only supposed it must be 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening, for it was in the month of October, and it was quite dark. All at once the noise of a door turning on its hinges made me start. A globe of fire appeared above the glazed opening of the ceiling, casting a strong light into my chamber, and I perceived with terror that a man was standing within a few paces of me. A table with 2 covers, bearing a supper ready prepared, stood as if by magic in the middle of the apartment. That man was he who had pursued me during a whole year, who had vowed my dishonor, and who by the first words that issued from his mouth gave me to understand he had accomplished it the preceding night.
"Scoundrel!" murmured Felton.
"Oh, yes, scoundrel!"
cried Milady, seeing the interest which the young officer, whose soul seemed to hang on her lips, took in this strange recital.
"Oh, yes, scoundrel! He believed, having triumphed over me in my sleep, that all was completed. He came hoping that I would accept my shame, as my shame was consummated. He came to offer his fortune in exchange for my love. All that the heart of a woman could contain of haughty contempt and disdainful words I poured out upon this man. Doubtless he was accustomed to such reproaches, for he listened to me calm and smiling, with his arms crossed over his breast. Then, when he thought I had said all, he advanced toward me. I sprang toward the table. I seized a knife. I placed it to my breast. 'Take one more step,' said I, 'and in addition to my honor, you shall have my death to reproach yourself with.' There was no doubt in my look, my voice, my whole person, that sincerity of gesture, of attitude, of accent, which carries conviction to the most perverse minds. For he paused. 'Your death,' said he. 'Oh, no! You are too charming a mistress to allow me to consent to lose you thus. After I have had the happiness to possess you only a single time. Adieu, my charmer.
I will wait to pay you my next visit till you are in a better humor." At these words he blew a whistle. The globe of fire which lighted the room reascended and disappeared. I found myself again in complete darkness. The same noise of a door opening and shutting was repeated the instant afterward. The flaming globe descended afresh, and I was completely alone. This moment was frightful. If I had any doubts as to my misfortune, these doubts had vanished in an overwhelming reality. I was in the power of a man whom I not only detested but despised, of a man capable of anything, and who had already given me a fatal proof of what he was able to do. "But who, then, was this man?" asked Felton. "I passed the night on a chair, starting at the least noise, for toward midnight the lamp went out, and I was again in darkness. But the night passed away without any fresh attempt on the part of my persecutor. Day came, the table had disappeared, only I still had the knife in my hand. The knife was my only hope. I was worn out with fatigue. Sleeplessness inflamed my eyes. I had not dared to sleep a single instant. The light of day reassured me. I went and threw myself on the bed without parting with the emancipating knife which I concealed under my pillow. When I awoke, a fresh meal was served. This time, in spite of my terrors, in spite of my agony, I began to feel a devouring hunger. It was 48 hours since I had taken any nourishment. I ate some bread and some fruit. Then, remembering the narcotic mixed with the water I had drunk, I would not touch that which was placed on the table, but filled my glass at a marble fountain fixed on the wall over my dressing-table. And yet, notwithstanding these precautions, I remained for some time in a terrible agitation of mind. But my fears were this time ill-founded. I passed the day without experiencing anything of the kind I dreaded. I took the precaution to half empty the carafe, in order that my suspicions might not be noticed. The evening came on, and with it darkness. But however profound was this darkness, my eyes began to accustom themselves to it. I saw amid the shadows the table sink through the floor. A quarter of an hour later it reappeared, bearing my supper. In an instant, thanks to the lamp, my chamber was once more lighted. I was determined to eat only such things as could not possibly have any soporific introduced into them. 2 eggs and some fruit composed my repast. Then I drew another glass of water from my protecting fountain and drank it. At the first swallow, it appeared to me not to have the same taste as in the morning. Suspicion instantly seized me. I paused, but I had already drunk half a glass. I threw the rest away with horror, and waited with the dew of fear upon my brow. No doubt some invisible witness had seen me draw the water from that fountain, and had taken advantage of my confidence in it, the better to assure my ruin, so coolly resolved upon, so cruelly pursued. Half an hour had not passed when the same symptoms began to appear, but as I had only drunk half a glass of the water, I contended longer, and instead of falling entirely asleep, I sank into a state of drowsiness, which left me a perception of what was passing around me, while depriving me of the strength either to defend myself or to fly. I dragged myself toward the bed, to seek the only defense I had left, my saving knife, but I could not reach the bolster. I sank on my knees, my hands clasped round one of the bedposts. Then I felt that I was lost.
Felton became frightfully pale, and a convulsive tremor crept through his whole body.
"And what was most frightful,"
continued Milady, her voice altered, as if she still experienced the same agony as at that awful minute,
"was that at this time I retained a consciousness of the danger that threatened me. Was that my soul, if I may say so, waked in my sleeping body. Was that I saw, that I heard. It is true that all was like a dream, but it was not the less frightful. I saw the lamp ascend and leave me in darkness. Then I heard the well-known creaking of the door, although I had heard that door open but twice. I felt instinctively that someone approached me. It is said that the doomed wretch in the deserts of America thus feels the approach of the serpent.
I wished to make an effort. I attempted to cry out. By an incredible effort of will, I even raised myself up, but only sank down again immediately, and to fall into the arms of my persecutor.
"Tell me who this man was!" cried the young officer. Milady saw at a single glance all the painful feelings she inspired in Felton by dwelling on every detail of her recital, but she would not spare him a single pang. The more profoundly she wounded his heart, the more certainly he would avenge her. She continued then, as if she had not heard his exclamation, or as if she thought the moment was not yet come to reply to it.
Only this time it was no longer an inert body, without feeling, that the villain had to deal with. I had told you that without being able to regain the complete exercise of my faculties, I retained the sense of my danger. I struggled then with all my strength, and doubtless opposed, weak as I was, a long resistance, for I heard him cry out, "These miserable Puritans!" I knew very well that they tired out their executioners, but I did not believe them so strong against their lovers. Alas! This desperate resistance could not last long. I felt my strength fail, and this time it was not my sleep that enabled the coward to prevail, but my swoon.
Felton listened without uttering a word or sound, except an inward expression of agony. The sweat streamed down his marbled forehead, and his hand under his coat tore his breast.
My first impulse on coming to myself was to feel under my pillow for the knife I had not been able to reach. If it had not been useful for defense, it might at least serve for expiation. But on taking this knife, Felton, a terrible idea occurred to me. I have sworn to tell you all, and I will tell you all. I have promised you the truth. I will tell it, were it to destroy me.
The idea came into your mind to avenge yourself on this man, did it not? Cried Felton.
Yes,
said Milady.
The idea was not that of a Christian, I knew, but without doubt that eternal enemy of our souls, that lion roaring constantly around us, breathed into it my mind. In short, what shall I say to you, Felton?
Continued Milady in the tone of a woman accusing herself of a crime.
This idea occurred to me and did not leave me. It is of this homicidal thought that I now bear the punishment.
Continue, said Felton. I am eager to see you attain your vengeance.
Oh, I resolved that it should take place as soon as possible. I had no doubt he would return the following night. During the day I had nothing to fear. When the hour of breakfast came, therefore, I did not hesitate to eat and drink. I had determined to make believe sup, but to eat nothing. I was forced then to combat the fast of the evening with the nourishment of the morning. Only I concealed a glass of water which remained after my breakfast, thirst having been the chief of my sufferings when I remained 48 hours without eating or drinking. The day passed away without having any other influence on me than to strengthen the resolution I had formed. Only I took care that my face should not betray the thoughts of my heart, for I had no doubt I was watched. Several times even I felt a smile on my lips. Felton, I dare not tell you at what idea I smiled. You would hold me in horror.
Go on, said Felton. You see plainly that I listen, and that I am anxious to know the end.
Evening came. The ordinary events took place. During the darkness, as before, my supper was brought. Then the lamp was lighted, and I sat down to table. I only ate some fruit. I pretended to pour out water from the jug, but I only drank that which I had saved in my glass. The substitution was made so carefully that my spies, if I had any, could have no suspicion of it. After supper I exhibited the same marks of languor as on the preceding evening, but this time as I yielded to fatigue, or as if I had become familiarized with danger, I dragged myself toward my bed, let my robe fall, and lay down. I found my knife where I had placed it, under the pillow, and while feigning to sleep, my hand grasped the handle of it convulsively. 2 hours passed away without anything fresh happening. Oh, my God! Who could have said so the evening before? I began to fear that he would not come. At length I saw the lamp rise softly and disappear in the depths of the ceiling. My chamber was filled with darkness and obscurity, but I made a strong effort to penetrate this darkness and obscurity. Nearly 10 minutes passed. I heard no other noise but the beating of my own heart. I implored heaven that he might come. At length I heard the well-known noise of the door, which opened and shut. I heard, notwithstanding the thickness of the carpet, a step which made the floor creak. I saw, notwithstanding the darkness, a shadow which approached my bed.
"Haste, haste," said Felton. "Do you not see that each of your words burns me like molten lead?"
"Then," continued Milady, "then I collected all my strength. I recalled to my mind that the movement of vengeance, or rather of justice, had struck. I looked upon myself as another Judith. I gathered myself up, my knife in my hand, and when I saw him near me, stretching out his arms to find his victim, then, with the last cry of agony and despair, I struck him in the middle of his breast. The miserable villain! He had foreseen all. His breast was covered with a coat of mail. The knife was bent against it. "Aha!" cried he, seizing my arm and wresting me from the weapon that had so badly served me. "You want to take my life, do you, my pretty Puritan? But that's more than dislike, that's ingratitude. Come, calm yourself, my sweet girl. I thought you had softened. I am not one of those tyrants who detain women by force. You don't love me. With my usual fatuity, I doubted it. Now I am convinced. Tomorrow you shall be free." I had but one wish. That was that he should kill me. "Beware," said I, "for my liberty is your dishonor." "Explain yourself, my pretty Sibyl." "Yes, for as soon as I leave this place, I will tell everything. I will proclaim the violence you have used toward me. I will describe my captivity. I will denounce this place of infamy. You are placed on high, my lord, but tremble. Above you there is the king. Above the king there is God. However perfect master he was over himself, my persecutor allowed a movement of anger to escape him. I could not see the expression of his countenance, but I felt the arm tremble upon which my hand was placed. "Then you shall not leave this place," said he. "Very well," cried I, "then the place of my punishment will be that of my tomb. I will die here, and you will see if a phantom that accuses is not more terrible than a living being that threatens. You shall have no weapon left in your power. There is a weapon which despair has placed within the reach of every creature who has the courage to use it. I will allow myself to die with hunger." "Come," said the wretch, "is not peace much better than such a war as that? I will restore you to liberty this moment. I will proclaim you a piece of immaculate virtue. I will name you the Lucretia of England. And I will say that you are the Sextus. I will denounce you before men as I have denounced you before God. And if it be necessary that, like Lucretia, I should sign my accusation with my blood, I will sign it." "Ah," said my enemy, in a jeering tone, "that's quite another thing. My faith, everything considered, you are very well off here. You shall want for nothing, and if you let yourself die of hunger, that will be your own fault." At these words he retired. I heard the door open and shut, and I remained overwhelmed, less, I confess it, by my grief than by the mortification of not having avenged myself. He kept his word. All the day, all the next night, passed away without my seeing him again. but I also kept my word to him, and I neither ate nor drank. I was, as I told him, resolved to die of hunger. I passed the day and the night in prayer, for I hoped that God would pardon me my suicide. The second night the door opened. I was lying on the floor, for my strength began to abandon me. At the noise I raised myself up on one hand. "Well," said a voice which vibrated in too terrible a manner in my ear not to be recognized. "Well, are we softened a little? Will we not pay for our liberty with a single promise of silence? Come, I am a good sort of prince," added he, "and although I like not Puritans, I do them justice. And it is the same with Puritanesses when they are pretty. Come, take a little oath for me on the cross. I won't ask anything more of you." "On the cross!" cried I, rising, for at that abhorrent voice I had recovered all my strength. "On the cross! I swear that no promise, no menace, no force, no torture shall close my mouth. On the cross I swear to denounce you everywhere as a murderer, as a thief of honor, as a base coward. On the cross I swear, if ever I leave this place, to call down vengeance upon you from the whole human race." "Beware," said the voice, in a threatening accent that I had never yet heard. "I have an extraordinary means which I will not employ but in the last extremity, to close your mouth, or at least to prevent anyone from believing a word you may utter." I mustered all my strength to reply to him with a burst of laughter. He saw that it was a merciless war between us, a war to the death. "Listen," said he, "I give you the rest of the night and all the day tomorrow. Reflect. Promise to be silent, and riches, consideration, even honor shall surround you. Threaten to speak, and I will condemn you to infamy." "You?" cried I. "You? To interminable, ineffaceable infamy?" "You?" repeated I. "Oh, I declare to you, Felton, I thought him mad." "Yes, yes, I," replied he. "Oh, leave me," said I. "Be gone if you do not desire to see me dash my head against that wall before your eyes. Very well, it is your own doing. Tomorrow evening, then." "Till tomorrow evening, then," replied I, allowing myself to fall and biting the carpet with rage.
Felton leaned for support upon a piece of furniture, and Milady saw, with the joy of a demon, that his strength would fail him perhaps before the end of her recital. End of chapter 56. Chapter 57 of the D'Artagnan Romances, Volume 1, The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas, translated by William Robson. Means for classical tragedy. After a moment of silence employed by Milady in observing the young man who listened to her, Milady continued her recital.
"It was nearly 3 days since I had eaten or drunk anything. I suffered frightful torments. At times there passed before me clouds which pressed my brow, which veiled my eyes. This was delirium. When the evening came, I was so weak that every time I fainted I thanked God, for I thought I was about to die. In the midst of one of these swoons I heard the door open. Terror recalled me to myself. He entered the apartment followed by a man in a mask. He was masked likewise, but I knew his step, I knew his voice, I knew him by those imposing bearing which hell has bestowed upon his person for the curse of humanity. "Well," said he to me, "have you made your mind up to take the oath I requested of you? You have said Puritans have but one word. Mine you have heard, and that is to pursue you, on earth to the tribunal of men, in heaven to the tribunal of God. You persist, then? I swear it before the God who hears me. I will take the whole world as a witness of your crime, and that until I have found an avenger." "You are a prostitute," said he in a voice of thunder, "and you shall undergo the punishment of prostitutes. branded in the eyes of the world you invoke, try to prove to that world that you are neither guilty nor mad." Then addressing the man who accompanied him, "Executioner," said he, "do your duty."
"Oh, his name! His name!" cried Felton. "His name! Tell it to me!"
Then, in spite of my cries, in spite of my resistance, for I began to comprehend that there was a question of something worse than death, the executioner seized me, threw me on the floor, fastened me with his bonds, and suffocated by sobs, almost without sense, invoking God, who did not listen to me, I uttered all at once a frightful cry of pain and shame. A burning fire, a red-hot iron, the iron of the executioner, was imprinted on my shoulder.
Felton uttered a groan.
"Here,"
said Milady, rising with the majesty of a queen.
"Here, Felton. Behold the new martyrdom, invented for a pure young girl, the victim of the brutality of a villain. Learn to know the heart of men, and henceforth make yourself less easily the instrument of their unjust vengeance."
Milady, with a rapid gesture, opened her robe, tore the cambric that covered her bosom, and read with feigned anger and simulated shame, showed the young man the ineffaceable impression which dishonored that beautiful shoulder. "But," cried Felton, "that is a fleur-de-lis which I see there."
"And therein consisted the infamy,"
replied Milady.
"the brand of England. It would be necessary to prove what tribunal had imposed it on me, and I could have made a public appeal to all the tribunals of the kingdom. But the brand of France! Oh, by that, I was branded indeed."
This was too much for Felton. Pale, motionless, overwhelmed by this frightful revelation, dazzled by the superhuman beauty of this woman who unveiled herself before him with an immodesty which appeared to him sublime, he ended by falling on his knees before her, as the early Christians did before those pure and holy martyrs whom the persecution of the emperors gave up in the circus to the sanguinary sensuality of the populace. The brand disappeared. The beauty alone remained. "Pardon! Pardon!" cried Felton. "Oh, pardon!" Milady read in his eyes love. Love!
"Pardon for what?"
asked she. "Pardon me for having joined with your persecutors." Milady held out her hand to him. "So beautiful, so young!" cried Felton, covering that hand with his kisses. Milady let one of those looks fall upon him which make a slave of a king. Felton was a Puritan. He abandoned the hand of this woman to kiss her feet. He no longer loved her, he adored her. When this crisis was past, when Milady appeared to have resumed her self-possession, which she had never lost, when Felton had seen her recover with the veil of chastity those treasures of love which were only concealed from him to make him desire them the more ardently, he said, "Ah, now, I have only one thing to ask of you. That is, the name of your true executioner. For to me there is but one. The other was an instrument, that was all."
"What, brother?"
cried Milady.
"Must I name him again? Have you not yet divined who he is?"
"What?" cried Felton. "He? Again he? Always he! What, the truly guilty?"
"The truly guilty,"
said Milady,
"is the ravager of England, the persecutor of true believers, the base ravisher of the honor of so many women, he who, to satisfy a caprice of his corrupt heart, is about to make England shed so much blood, who protects the Protestants today and will betray them tomorrow."
"Buckingham! It is then Buckingham!" cried Felton in a high state of excitement. Milady concealed her face in her hands, as if she could not endure the shame which this name recalled to her.
"Buckingham, the executioner of this angelic creature!" cried Felton. "And thou hast not hurled thy thunder at him, my God! And thou hast left him noble, honored, powerful, for the ruin of us all!" "God abandons him who abandons himself," said Milady.
"But he will draw upon his head the punishment reserved for the damned," said Felton with increasing exultation. "He wills that human vengeance should precede celestial justice."
"Men fear him and spare him."
"I," said Felton, "I do not fear him, nor will I spare him." The soul of Milady was bathed in an infernal joy. "But how can Lord de Winter, my protector, my father," asked Felton, "possibly be mixed up with all this?"
"Listen, Felton," resumed Milady, "for by the side of base and contemptible men there are often found great and generous natures. I had an affianced husband, a man whom I loved and who loved me. A heart like yours, Felton, a man like you. I went to him and told him all. He knew me, that man did, and did not doubt an instant. He was a nobleman, a man equal to Buckingham in every respect. He said nothing. He only girded on his sword, wrapped himself in his cloak, and went straight to Buckingham Palace."
"Yes, yes," said Felton. "I understand how he would act. But with such men it is not the sword that should be employed. It is the poniard."
"Buckingham had left England the day before, sent as ambassador to Spain to demand the hand of the Infanta for King Charles I, who was then only Prince of Wales. My affianced husband returned. 'Hear me,' said he. 'This man has gone, and for the moment has consequently escaped my vengeance. But let us be united as we were to have been, and then leave it to Lord de Winter to maintain his own honor and that of his wife.'"
"Lord de Winter!" cried Felton.
"Yes," said Milady, "Lord de Winter. And now you can understand it all, can you not? Buckingham remained nearly a year absent. A week before his return, Lord de Winter died, leaving me his sole heir. Whence came the blow? God knows all, knows without doubt. But as for me, I accuse nobody."
"Oh, what an abyss! What an abyss!" cried Felton.
"Lord de Winter died without revealing anything to his brother. The terrible secret was to be concealed till it burst, like a clap of thunder over the head of the guilty. Your protector had seen with pain this marriage of his elder brother with a portionless girl. I was sensible that I could look for no support from a man disappointed in his hopes of an inheritance. I went to France, with a determination to remain there for the rest of my life. But all my fortune is in England. Communication being closed by the war, I was in want of everything. I was then obliged to come back again. 6 days ago I landed at Portsmouth."
"Well?" said Felton.
"Well, Buckingham heard by some means, no doubt, of my return. He spoke of me to Lord de Winter, already prejudiced against me, and told him that his sister-in-law was a prostitute, a branded woman. The noble and pure voice of my husband was no longer here to defend me. Lord de Winter believed all that was told him with so much the more ease that it was his interest to believe it. He caused me to be arrested, had me conducted hither, and placed me under your guard. You know the rest. The day after tomorrow he banishes me. He transports me. The day after tomorrow he exiles me among the infamous. Oh, the train is well laid. The plot is clever. My honor will not survive it. You see then, Felton, I can do nothing but die. Felton, give me that knife."
And at these words, as if all her strength was exhausted, Milady sank, weak and languishing, into the arms of the young officer, who, intoxicated with love, anger, and voluptuous sensations hitherto unknown, received her with transport, pressed her against his heart, all trembling at the breath from that charming mouth, bewildered by the contact with that palpitating bosom. "No, no," said he. "No, you shall live honored and pure. You shall live to triumph over your enemies." Milady put him from her slowly with her hand, while drawing him nearer with her look. But Felton, in his turn, embraced her more closely, imploring her like a divinity.
"Oh, death, death!" said she, lowering her voice and her eyelids. "Oh, death rather than shame! Felton, my brother, my friend, I conjure you."
"No!" cried Felton. "No! You shall live, and you shall be avenged."
"Felton, I bring misfortune to all who surround me. Felton, abandon me. Felton, let me die."
"Well, then we will live and die together," cried he, pressing his lips to those of the prisoner. Several strokes resounded at the door. This time Milady really pushed him away from her.
"Hark!" said she. "We have been overheard. Someone is coming. All is over. We are lost."
"No," said Felton. "It is only the sentinel warning me that they are about to change the guard."
"Then run to the door and open it yourself."
Felton obeyed. This woman was now his whole thought, his whole soul. He found himself face to face with a sergeant commanding a watch patrol. "Well, what is the matter?" asked the young lieutenant. "You told me to open the door if I heard anyone cry out," said the soldier, "but you forgot to leave me the key. I heard you cry out, without understanding what you said. I tried to open the door, but it was locked inside. Then I called the sergeant." "And here I am," said the sergeant. Felton, quite bewildered, almost mad, stood speechless. Milady plainly perceived that it was now her turn to take part in the scene. She ran to the table and, seizing the knife which Felton had laid down, exclaimed,
"And by what right will you prevent me from dying?"
"Great God!" exclaimed Felton on seeing the knife glitter in her hand. At that moment a burst of ironical laughter resounded through the corridor. The Baron, attracted by the noise, in his chamber gown, his sword under his arm, stood in the doorway. "Ha!" said he. "Here we are, at the last act of the tragedy. You see, Felton, the drama has gone through all the phases I named. But be easy, no blood will flow." Milady perceived that all was lost unless she gave Felton an immediate and terrible proof of her courage.
"You are mistaken, my lord. Blood will flow, and may that blood fall back on those who cause it to flow."
Felton uttered a cry and rushed toward her. He was too late. Milady had stabbed herself. But the knife had fortunately, we ought to say skillfully, come in contact with the steel busk, which at that period, like a cuirass, defended the chests of women. It had glided down it, tearing the robe, and had penetrated slantingly between the flesh and the ribs. Milady's robe was not the less stained with blood in a second. Milady fell down and seemed to be in a swoon. Felton snatched away the knife. "See, my lord," said he in a deep, gloomy tone, "here is a woman who was under my guard, and who has killed herself." "Be at ease, Felton," said Lord de Winter. "She is not dead. Demons do not die so easily. Be tranquil, and go and wait for me in my chamber." "But, my lord—" "Go, sir, I command you." At this injunction from his superior, Felton obeyed, but in going out he put the knife into his bosom. As to Lord de Winter, he contented himself with calling the woman who waited on Milady, and when she was come, he recommended the prisoner, who was still fainting, to her care, and left them alone. Meanwhile, All things considered, and notwithstanding his suspicions, as the wound might be serious, he immediately sent off a mounted man to find a physician. End of chapter 57.
Did it feel to you like Milady should have had mustaches to twirl when saying, "Good, the austere Puritan lies"? Wow. Poor Felton. Just, oof. And Dumas' writing in our second chapter today in 57, just the way she uses his name against him, the Felton, that she's ramping it up, and there is no way he can resist. And it is so sad, but also was so predictable. So I stopped us here today because this is now pretty much the completion of Milady's captivity. We now move back into the more rollicking action adventure part of the story with our next episode, which is great because that's going to start us for the new year. Don't forget to send in book commercials, especially if you got books at Christmas time that you are loving. Please send in a little 2, 3, 4 minute video telling us why you loved it. And then we will compile those and put them up on the CraftLit YouTube site. And then everybody can also enjoy the same book if they want to, because they liked your commercial. All right. I hope you enjoyed the 12 days of CraftLit. Huge thank you to Eric for the heavy lift on all of that. And I'll talk to you later. Take care. Have a good one. Bye. A big thanks to all the CraftLit listeners who support the show by being a premium audio member via craftlit.com/premium or via patreon.com/craftlit. Your support for the show is what's kept us going since 2006. If you feel like getting free audio pretty much every week, please consider supporting the show by heading over to patreon.com/craftlit and pledging what you feel the show is worth to you. If you can't support the show that way, consider leaving a review at iTunes or at our facebook.com/craftlit page, or follow at CraftLit on Twitter and share the show with your followers too. And remember, if your hands are too busy to pick up a book, at least you can turn one on.